You won't believe what really happened behind the closed doors of Bishop Clarence McClendon's life. To the world, he was a polished preacher, captivating crowds, dressed in luxury, jet-setting across continents with the aura of divine favor. His sermons shook stadiums, his presence demanded attention, and many hailed him as a true prophet. But while the cameras captured charisma and confidence, something far more troubling was unfolding out of sight. Behind the pulpit and away from the public eye, a storm had been brewing for years, one that would eventually tear through the illusion of perfection. His wife, once silent, has now come forward, revealing painful truths that have rocked the gospel world. What really went on in the McClendon household? What secrets were buried beneath the surface of fame and faith? Stay tuned, because the revelations you're about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about Clarence McClendon. She had stood by his side through it all. The small beginnings, the long nights, the rise to fame. But behind the polished sermons and designer suits, she sensed something was shifting. At first, it was just a feeling, secretive late-night calls, deleted messages, sudden unexplained trips. She told herself he was under pressure, that ministry life was demanding. But deep down, her prayers couldn't quiet the truth. The man she once called husband, the man she believed was anointed, was changing. And when she finally broke her silence, what she revealed was darker than anyone could have imagined. Clarence McClendon wasn't always a spiritual superstar. He built his empire from scratch, captivating crowds with his voice, his presence, his so-called purpose. Soon, his name echoed through television screens and church pews alike. But with fame came hunger, for money, for power, and eventually, for women. The sermons shifted, focusing more on prosperity than scripture. The church transformed into a fortress of luxury, bodyguards, luxury cars, and donation pleas that masked the growing corruption. What began as a calling had become a kingdom, and at the center stood a man who may have lost sight of God completely, gradually stopped interacting with members as he used to, and Clarence became more of a performer. Then, one night, his wife discovered a receipt in his jacket pocket for a hotel stay in a different city the same weekend he told her he was at a pastor's retreat. Her heart fell, but she chose not to confront him right away. Instead, she began to pay closer attention to every move he made, every excuse he made, and every odd phone call she received. Days passed, weeks passed, and the evidence began to pile up in her heart. Broke more every day, but before she acted, she needed to know the truth. One night, she followed him after he told her he was flying to another state for a gospel event. But something felt strange, so she figured out a way to find him. What she found altered everything. Clarence wasn't at a church or conference, but rather a luxury hotel with a woman. She stood motionless outside the hotel lobby, her hands shaking, as she watched them enter together, smiling too closely. Felt like a knife right to her chest after everything they'd built. After all the prayers, sacrifices, and sleepless nights. And this was what it had come to. She didn't confront him that night. Instead, she got back in her car and pushed the tears away, but something inside of her changed. She knew that this wasn't a mistake, but rather a pattern, and it had to be revealed back home, so she began investigating. Knowing that he would lie if she asked, she dug deeper through his credit card bills, emails, and even private correspondence. Communications from his ministry account. What she discovered was worse than she had anticipated. Multiple flights to various destinations were scheduled, and there was more than one woman. Extravagant presents, hidden bank accounts. The last straw came when she overheard him on the phone late one night while he was in his office. The door cracked just enough for her to hear him talking to one of the women, not with guilt or shame, but with excitement, making plans, promising things, and acting as though she didn't exist. She knew it was over. But she kept quiet for weeks while she thought they were building a life together, because Clarence had been living a double life as a pastor and a playboy. She went to church, smiled at members, and stood next to him during sermons. Knowing the truth tore her apart, but she was planning something. Didn't just want to walk away. She wanted the world to know the truth, so she reached out to someone unexpected, a former church staff member who had left months ago under strange circumstances. At first, he was hesitant to talk, but when she shared what she had found, he broke down. He had seen things too. He had kept secrets he had been paid to stay silent. But now he was ready to talk together. They started gathering everything: documents, screenshots, witness statements. It was all there, a clear picture of a man who had built an empire on lies. She felt heartbroken, but she also felt powerful for the first time in years. She wasn't afraid the weight of the truth became heavier with each passing day, but so did her determination. Standing beside Clarence on that church stage every time she held back tears while he preached about loyalty and love, it all felt like part of a twisted play. And now she held the script. She and the former staff member, now a close ally, had collected enough proof to shake the foundation Clarence had built his entire image on, but it wouldn't be easy to expose him. People idolized Clarence, and when she spoke, she knew they would call her resentful, furious, or even insane, but she was prepared, so they chose to go public in a way that would not be quieted. A secure yet accessible private web page where the facts without fancy words speak for themselves. Receipts, voice notes, screenshots, testimonials. On a Sunday, everything went online at midnight. By morning, everything had changed, and the initial uncertainty and subsequent denial were like a wildfire. Within 48 hours, local blogs had picked up accusations against a well-known pastor, but this was no accusation. Rather, it was evidence staring them in the face. Clarence called her that evening for the first time in months, and he didn't sound confident. His voice shook as he asked, "Why are you doing this to me?" His team sent out a brief message that was vague and avoided any real answers. He inquired, but instead of screaming or crying, she just stated, "I'm not doing this to you, you did this to yourself." Then she hung up, but she wasn't prepared for what came next that night. She noticed a black car parked across the street from her house. No one got out. It stayed there for hours. Her phone began ringing, non-stop, unknown numbers, threatening messages, even people pretending to be reporters. She realized Clarence wasn't going down without a fight. He still had power, and now he was using it to intimidate her. The former staff member urged her to go to the police, but she hesitated. Would they take her seriously? This wasn't just about cheating anymore. It was about control, fear, silence. But if Clarence thought fear would stop her, he didn't know her anymore. She wasn't the same woman who used to stay quiet. To keep the peace one day, she found something chilling. An envelope slid under her door. No name, no return address. Inside were printed photos, pictures of her walking to her car, picking up groceries, sitting at a cafe. Someone had been following her, watching her. The message was clear: back off or pay the price. That night, with her heart racing, she decided that if Clarence wanted war, he would get it, not with violence or fear, but with truth, because it wasn't just about what he did to her. It was about every woman he used, every follower he lied to, and everyone who gave up everything thinking they were helping a man of God. In the weeks that followed, everything went more quickly than she had anticipated. Social media turned into a battlefield, and hashtags with Clarence's name began trending, and people who had previously praised him began to doubt everything. Then, without warning, more women came forward, one by one, sending her messages, some short stories, some painfully long ones that mirrored her promises. Manipulation, guilt trips disguised as spiritual guidance. The more stories that emerged, the more obvious it became that Clarence Green was a guy who used the pulpit to conceal rather than to heal. Only one unsuccessful marriage. The pressure on Clarence increased as a result of this unchecked control system. For years, sponsors withdrew their speaking engagements. His once full Sunday services appeared to be half empty, and he refused to accept responsibility in a surprise live webcast. At last, Clarence addressed the matter. Sitting in what appeared to be his home office, wearing a simple hoodie, he looked into the camera with teary eyes and said that he was a flawed man who had failed and needed time for introspection and healing. However, he never mentioned her name or offered a direct apology to the woman he had wronged. Instead, he made it about his own suffering, growth, and alleged journey back to grace. She watched it in silence, not upset, just disappointed. It was the same charm he used on her, the same gentle tone, but now it had no power. People could see right through it, and the comments were filled with anger instead of sympathy. You can't play the victim, but Clarence wasn't done yet. A few days later, his legal team sent her a cease and desist letter. They claimed defamation, harassment, emotional damage. She felt a flicker of panic, but it passed because she had proof. She had the truth, And if they wanted to go to court, she was ready with the help of her allies. She hired a lawyer and countered the threats. She also filed a restraining order, submitted the envelope in the photos to police, and for the first time felt like the law might be on her side. Slowly, the fear started fading. Support began pouring in, not just from strangers online, but from people she had once sat next to in church, people who whispered their own stories, people who thanked her for being brave. Some had left the church in silence, too scared to say why. Now they had a voice through her. She didn't want revenge anymore. She wanted freedom for herself and for everyone who had lived under Clarence's shadow. So she started something new, a quiet community, a space for women who had been spiritually manipulated, a place to heal. No sermons, no pretending, just truth. And Clarence, he softly faded away without going to jail. She was no longer the same woman who had entered that church years ago believing that love and faith were the same thing. She had been broken but not destroyed, and now she stood tall, not as a victim or someone's wife, but as the voice that would not be silenced. For a man who had once stood on stages under spotlights, silence was the loudest condemnation of all. She confessed, but the power he once had to lie, cheat, and silence was gone.